So, welcome everybody to this week's edition of Level Up Live. I have with me Steve Weinberg, and we're going to have an interesting conversation about above quota performance in sales. But before we do that, we've got to start with our normal questions and statements. So, first of all, as you're listening to the show, either whether you're listening live or whether you're watching it on a replay, do us a favor and put comments in. If you have questions, answer the questions that we ask in the comments, because we always like to go back and follow up and say hi to the folks that join us on the replay. And then my favorite question is, where are you watching from? Now, today, I am home in my office, and I actually will be here for a couple of more weeks. Long stretch for me lately, it seems. But West is not with us. He was supposed to be on vacation, but instead he's digging out and dealing with the aftermath of the snow event that tore up Buffalo, and he doesn't live that far from Buffalo, so Canada got hammered like that as well. And we have Steve with us. Steve, where are you watching from today? Or actually, where are you joining us from?
I'm in the Chicago area, in the northwest suburbs of Chicago.
Okay, well, very good. Before we get started on talking about our topic, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I don't know where to start, but I originally was an accountant a long time ago. And while I was an accountant, they asked me to implement software packages, and I did that and ended up joining one of the software package companies as a salesperson. I was not a trained salesperson. I moved over. I knew the package intimately because I had used it. And so I started calling on people and explaining how it worked. And the people that I called on were people that were similar to my background. So I think I was very effective in transmitting the value proposition to them because I understood it so well. And I kind of learned sales from the ground up with not a lot of training.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Say hi to, we got Larry joined us today from Long Island, and Greg's with us. But Greg, where are you today? Are you still down in Florida, or did you move back north? There are a couple of our regulars. So you started from the ground up learning sales
Right.
the hard way. Let's call it that. And
Well,
yet you had some success, I think, right?
Yes, and my sales training consisted of, when I first met with my boss, he handed me a box of leads that were about 5 years old and said, "Here, call these people. They were interested once in what we had." And that was a real experience. But I initially joined, it was a startup, and I worked my way up from being a salesperson to being a regional sales manager to eventually becoming the VP of sales. The company was acquired by Dun & Bradstreet, and I moved around in Dun & Bradstreet, became VP of sales at Nielsen Marketing Research, which they also own, and also Dun & Bradstreet Software. So, and then most recently, I was with a company called Acuity, which is in the anti-money laundering space. Very interesting area to be in.
Oh, well, very, very interesting. So you've done sales in a lot of different things. So let me ask you a question, and this kind of ties to your book a little bit. We'll talk about the book a little more later. But in your experiences, you've had those roles in leadership, and as you watched other salesmen as you were coming up, why do you think it is that so many salespeople fail to make their quota? What is it that stops and gets in their way?
Well, when I first started writing the book, I did some research on what the actual percentage is of people that don't make their sales quota. And it astonished me that number, depending on the company that did the research, was anywhere from 45 to 60%. So I settled on the number of 50%. But when you think about it, 50% of your sales force at any point in time doesn't reach their quota. That's just an amazing number, and companies seem to accept that. But to answer your question directly, if you ask the salespeople that didn't make their quota why they didn't make their quota, they would tell you their quota is too high. But but keep in mind, if 50% didn't make it, that means 50% did make it. So the quotas are normally okay, but there are a lot of different reasons. And I think some of the reasons that that I have found was that salespeople tend to call on the wrong prospects and they waste a lot of time with them. And time is really one of the biggest assets that a salesperson has going for them. And it's limited, it's finite. So if you waste a lot of time on people that never buy, then your chances of reaching the quota are pretty poor. A lot of times they call on the wrong people in the organization. They don't meet with decision makers. They don't understand what their value proposition is. When they call on people, they say, well, you need to buy our product. And the prospect says, well, why? And they say, well, because it does this, it does this, it has this, it has that, it does, and they list all the bells and whistles, but they never connect it to any reason, why the company would do it. And I think another major reason is that salespeople forget to understand who their biggest competition is. And the biggest competition is not the company that they normally compete with in the marketplace. Their biggest competition is do nothing. So if they don't come up with a good reason for the buyer to buy, then the default position is do nothing, which means they don't make the sale and then they don't achieve their quota. So those are a few of the major reasons.
Okay. Yeah, we got a comment here. Larry said lack of focus is a key thing. And I would agree with that. Having run an organization where I managed salespeople very poorly, because that wasn't my wheelhouse. But, I think that the lack of focus is a piece of it. Greg commented here that a box to leads is how it starts. I love the fact that they were 5 years old, so they've probably already upgraded and done whatever it was they had needed to do. And Greg's in Florida.
Right. I worked for a company called McCormick and Dodge, and I remember calling one company up and I said, this is Steve from McCormick and Dodge. And the lady that answered the phone put it down and yelled to the guy. He said, Jim, your car's ready. So it really happened.
Oh, I would believe it. I think that name recognition is a piece of it. I think, and I'm a huge believer. I have some very customer-centric things that I think about a lot. I deal more on the service side. But I think that one of the things that happens is that they hear from a sales guy only when it's time to upgrade and kind of renew it. And so that person's no longer in their mind. Whereas people that I think if you maintain relationships and you're constantly giving to people, and I'm a fan of the give first process, if you give people things, they'll remember you. And then when it's time to sell them something, that piece is a little easier. That wasn't a prepared question, but what do you think about that as a part of the issue?
I think every single time that a salesperson speaks with a prospect, they should tell or give them information that the prospect does not already know. So that way they add value to the conversation, which gives the prospect a good reason to speak with them. Yeah. The reason to speak with a salesperson is not to tell the salesperson what's going on right now or how their purchase is going, but it should be an information exchange both ways.
Yep, I would agree with that. So one of the things that you talk about, and I wanted to bring this up because this is something that I'm a fan of, was about using LinkedIn, because I see, I'll relate a little my experience on LinkedIn, because I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, but I get people that cold request a connection with me on LinkedIn. And as soon as I click on that and accept it, I immediately start getting a sales pitch from somebody, either a bot, and I think some of it is bot driven, but I think the rest of the time it's just somebody doesn't know anything about me, anything about my company, but they have something they think I absolutely need. And you think that is a good approach? And how would you say that salespeople could get better with using LinkedIn?
I would say what you described, I would call sales malpractice. So I am a huge believer in LinkedIn. I was an early adopter. I've been recognized by LinkedIn as one of their, I think, first 5,000 users. So I'm using it a long time. I do proselytize, and I meet with, in my most recent position, I was training new salespeople, And I would sit down with them and I would ask them about LinkedIn. And almost everybody now uses LinkedIn for their career management. They look for jobs on LinkedIn. They put their profile on LinkedIn, and companies use LinkedIn for recruiting more than anything else right now. But salespeople right now are typically underutilizing it, and they don't know how to use it. And in my book, I go through step by step how to use it, how to set up your profile, how to join groups, how to make connections. But to go back to your question, I would never connect with somebody and then start selling them, because to me that would be spam. And I know when I receive spam, I reach for the delete button as fast as I can get there. So what I would do is, first of all, target the companies that you want to sell to. And, don't sell to the universe. Sell to where your product or solution fits best. And then look at the titles of the people at those companies and find those people, and then reach out to them and then offer them something like, I have some information that may be useful to you, and connect with them that way. And then continue to provide them with information and build a relationship with them. At some point, maybe, a month or 2 or 3 months later, then you could approach them and say, are you interested in learning how our company can help you out? And the answer could be yes or no. And if it's no, then, you abide by it. Or sometimes I would say to them, are you the person that decides on purchasing in this particular area? And even though I may have targeted a person in a position that I thought was the right one, sometimes it's not the right person. And they will say to me, no, I don't do that. That's handled by Nancy. And then I would ask them to introduce me to Nancy, right? So then they would do that, and I would have a warm introduction to the person who's actually making the decision. But just to add some more information to this, I used LinkedIn to close to develop the lead that resulted in the largest sale in our company's history. And it was by a multiple of 8 times over the previous highest one. So, to give you some context to that, it was our normal sales price was in the, somewhere in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. And this was in the area of tens of millions. So this all was a result of using LinkedIn. And so why would someone not want to use something that could make you a lot more productive and use it as a networking tool?
Okay, so I got 2 comments from Greg. I'll read both of them, and then I'll let you address them. He says, I love all this, but isn't this message as old as dirt? Haven't we been saying this forever? And then his second one is I haven't used LinkedIn for job search ever. And then he asked, do you think Navigator's worth the investment?
Yeah, to answer your second question, I think Navigator is worth the investment. But going back to the first question, when I meet with salespeople, I find that, I would say that only maybe 10 to 15% of them are really using LinkedIn as a lead development tool. So, the message may be old as dirt, but they're not doing it. People are not using it. And the company that I was at last did buy Navigator, and which allows you to send what they call in-mails, messages to people that you're not connected with. But even after that, a lot of people didn't use it. So why wouldn't you use something that makes your job easier? Well, some people are just stubborn, or they just don't want to adopt new technologies, or some people just don't like social media. Some people, perhaps of my generation, the baby boomers, they resist social media. And that's unfortunate, because it right now it doesn't cost anything for the basic LinkedIn, and you can use it. And one way I can tell whether or not salespeople are using it is I look and see how many connections they have. So if they tell me they're using it and they have 89 connections, then they're lying to me. Okay, so nobody with 89 connections is really using it. And I look and see how many groups they're in. Well, the groups are absolutely wonderful, because this is like they're affinity groups. You can join anything from a pet that you like, maybe the German Shepherd lovers group to an industry group, like you could be in the utilities accounting group. So, and there are actually, I think right now over 1 million groups. So why would you not want to join these and exchange information with people that are in the same business that you are?
Yeah, I want to come back to a couple of things you said, but let's address a couple of the audience's comments. Larry Kirst made this statement. He said, build an pipeline, employ today's best practices, networking key today, and he's evidently is the past president of LinkedIn sales and marketing execs. So, and I love what you say about the networking. And I think of LinkedIn. I used to be a huge fixture when I had my business. I was a copier dealer, and I was a fixture to the point that if I missed a business after hours put on by the Chamber of Commerce, somebody would call me to see if I was sick. But it's building those connections, and I still believe in the value of building it in person in social settings like a Chamber of Commerce, or but I also think that LinkedIn gives us the equivalent on a global scale today. Your thought on that and on what Larry said?
I totally agree. And, also, if you join the groups and somebody in that group finds out some information that something new that happened, or perhaps a new regulatory change, or a new market change, or something that's really important, they'll usually post it on LinkedIn. And you read this, and you can check it out. You do some research, you Google it, maybe look at the Wall Street Journal, and now you have a piece of information that you can bring to your prospects and say, "Are you aware? I understand that you're interested in whatever it is, in entering in the Asian market. Are you aware of this new rule that just came into effect? Are you aware of these new sanctions or whatever?" And so you're finding information from the people that you're networking with, and then you're using that information to build value to your prospects, to bring value to your prospects.
And I'm going to come back to that, because that's exactly where I want to go. But Greg said he was referring to the quota discussion, and I we talk about this all the time, Greg. But he said that LinkedIn is still on the upswing of adoption, and I think that the early adopters that are doing it right, because there's a right way and a wrong way, are the ones that are going to have really good success in the future. But I want to go back to your last statement, because I love what you just talked about sharing something that's of value. And that goes back to my concept of giving to people. So if in your inbox, in the messages that you get, or if in the post that somebody makes, you find content that's valuable, you think about how does that impact you? That person starts to build credibility with you. They start to become more valuable in your eyes. And we go back to this very simple concept that people buy from people they know, like, and trust. Well, if you're sharing beneficial content that's not about you selling something today, I think you build both the know and the like piece and the trust of in that equation. I'll let you talk about it now.
I used to believe that people only bought from people that they liked, and now I don't believe that. I think I've seen people that will buy from sellers that they don't particularly care for, but they trust them, and the sellers bring value to them. So, and I spent a lot of time analyzing losses when there was losses, and I would contact the buyer, and I'd say, "Well, why did my salesperson lose?" And they said, "Well, you know what? Your salesperson was the nicest person I ever dealt with in my life, but this other person that I work with gave me a lot more information, helped me out, helped me understand what they could do for me a whole lot better." So it's not so much being liked as it is being trusted. And building trust is something that takes months, but can be destroyed in seconds.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I am, when I had my company, that somebody did something that damaged that customer relationship, it was hard for them to keep working for me, because it's so easy. And, I have dealt with companies that had horrible issues arise, but I
Right.
kept dealing with them because of the way they dealt with it. And that's one of the things I teach in my service management class is the need to make sure that you take care of that customer relationship. One of my favorite books of all times, and it's not our industry related, but is Customers for Life by a guy named Sewell. I think it's Carl Sewell, but he built the largest, most successful series of luxury car dealerships, probably in the world, but very definitely in the United States. I mean, head and shoulders, and they're still in existence today. But his focus was always on taking care of and resolving the customer's issues. And I think that starts, again, back for the sales guy, is that if he's bringing things that helps that person solve a problem, it may not be related to what he's selling, but if he brings them something useful, you start to build that relationship.
Including bringing bad news. I found that sometimes salespeople are reluctant to tell their prospects something that they view as negative. But I feel that bad news can be like cancer, that eventually it'll overtake the situation. So if someone is honest with the prospect and calls them up and says, that delivery that I told you was going to happen next week, well, something came up and it's going to be delayed 2 weeks. What can I do to help, your situation? Be honest with them and tell them that. And if it's bad news, tell them bad news. And it really is all about building trust.
Well, along those lines, it's interesting for me that I would. Oh, I don't know why I'm starting to pick up an echo all of a sudden. Let me fix it. Sorry, guys. Just drop my volume a little bit. One of the things that would pop up in when I had my dealership was people would call me and they'd need something I didn't sell, or they'd need something that I didn't have the best solution for even. And I would send them to the competitors. I would give them a recommendation to a competitor that I thought was ethical and would take good care of them. And
Right.
I was okay with that because what I just did was, again, reinforce the fact that I was looking for their best interest. And that goes to the trust piece of it. If somebody knows you're looking out for their best interest, that what you want for them is the best for them, I'm a firm believer that it's going to help, in the long run. It's not a short-term thing. It's a long-term relationship.
I agree with you on that. And I ended up selling to the same person a few times at 3 different companies. So as people move from company to company, if they know and trust you, they'll bring you into the next company they work for. And it seems like people are a whole lot more mobile today. So it's important to build trust with people and understand that they will leave and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me a little more about your book.
Well, the genesis of my book was that when I was managing salespeople, I had this list of bullets that were about 15 or 18 items, and I called them Steveisms. And I would sit down with my sales team and go over them. And they were just bullets, so they weren't developed at all. And I would explain them to them. So, for example, and some of them were perhaps maybe not as obvious as they thought. So one of the bullets was, if you're not winning, you're losing. And people would say, well, isn't that obvious? And I'd say, no, it's not, because, what that really means is if you're not getting positive feedback from the buyer, you're probably not winning. I mean, salespeople would tell me, I would say to them, how's it going on this sale? Oh, it's going well. How do you know that? Well, because they're really nice to me. They return my phone calls. So I took these bullets, and after I retired from my position, I decided to just write chapters on each one of them. And that became the book called Above Quota Performance. And because I have a very non-traditional approach to sales, I decided that this is something that, the market really needed to hear. Another example is I believe objections are good. Now, when you meet with pretty much every sales trainer in the market today, and they're all really, really good. Everyone I met was good. They all have training classes on how to overcome objections. And, if the prospect says this, you do that. If they do this, you do that. And I call that sales jujitsu. And in my book, what I talk about is welcoming objections. So I felt that I had a message that was different and that it could help a lot of salespeople. And, my goal is to really help the 50% that are failing, and hopefully they'll succeed. And the 50% that are not success, that are not failing, help them do better and achieve better. Because I was almost every year the number one performing sales rep in the company I was at. And I think I really do have a lot that can be added. So the book was published on October 18th, and it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Books A Million and pretty much everywhere online for people to read about it. I hope if people do buy it, they get a lot out of it. That's my intention.
Okay, and if somebody wanted to reach out to you and connect with you individually, what's the best contact for them? And I'll put it in
probably
the
website. My website is www.steveweinberg.sales. SteveWeinbergSales.com. I'm sorry. That's SteveWeinberg sales, one word.com. They could reach me in the website, and I am very willing to answer any questions that people have for me.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll put all that information in the comments. We're coming up on the end of our hour. I appreciate our audience for being here and being so participatory today. Thanks, guys. I am sure that if companies will, I am a believer in investing in your people. I love one of the 7 habits, and I think that it's something that that employers could take advantage of, and that's sharpening the saw. And that's building, in my service management class, I teach people and require them to read books, as part of the course, like you would a college course, and do a book report. And it's interesting, I think that for companies in general, that developing reading lists of things that they expect from their employees, not give them 100 books a week, but I think that encouraging your employees and facilitating that process of getting them to read things that will help them grow in their skill set and in their customers' ability, just so many different ways. I think that is a way a company can help sharpen the saw of their employees. And I think there's a great value in that.
Well, one of the things I did was try to determine what makes some salespeople better than other salespeople. And I think the number one thing to me was they're self-motivated, also that they have customer empathy. But I think another one is intellectual curiosity. The best salespeople are people that always want to learn. They want to learn about their industry. They want to learn about their customers. They want to learn to make themselves better, whether they're interested in travel or cooking or whatever it is. The best salespeople are people that always are self-motivated and want to make themselves better. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. And Greg said good stuff today. Thanks, Greg. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And in consideration for our audience, we're coming up on the almost a half hour, so we'll say goodbye to everybody. Well, thank you for joining us again. If you're watching on the replay, put the comments in anyway, and we'll be back every week. Everybody, next week we're going to talk with Mike Stramaglio about EEC and some of the things he's got going on. Wes should be back, so we'll both be hopefully home and able to talk. And we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you.